Star Trek Lower Decks did a Deep Space Nine episode, which we watched right before we recorded this. It was really funny.
Very funny.
However, they do mention, I feel vindicated in this, because they mention brown holes as an actual spatial anomaly. And I would like to say, just let the record be very clear, that I beat them to it by about 8 hours. My brown hole was first.
It was
first amongst brown holes.
It's quite a distinction.
It's really the only crowning distinction I have in my life.
Wear it with pride.
I will air out my brown hole.
Yeah, we'll keep that under wraps if you would. You're like, all right, just...
At least off the camera.
I retract everything I said about it.
Oh.
We should just sweep that under the rug.
All right, now, babushka.
Look, I'm cold, all right? I need a blanket.
Welcome to the Astro Maxx Show. We are the nerd topic discussion channel where we discuss nerd topics. We've been on a Star Trek tear. We started off with just some random Star Trek episodes, and then we got hooked on Strange New Worlds. We were a little late to that party, but that's okay. We've really been enjoying it. So we've been doing weekly discussions of not new Strange New Worlds episodes, but new
Sequential
episodes. Yes, thank you. Sequential episodes of Strange New Worlds. And we're going to continue to do that in this episode, but we're going to do it a little bit different. To be honest, this episode 7 of Strange New Worlds, Rise Where the Darkness Can't Reach Us, or some kind of clunky name like that.
Lift us to where suffering cannot reach. Lift us where suffering cannot reach.
Much more eloquent.
Yes.
Both of us kind of had a meh feeling about this episode.
It was a little meh.
We didn't love it. We didn't dislike it.
No.
But we didn't really feel it was enough of an episode to fill the Astro Maxx Show. So we're going to take this opportunity, 7 episodes into Strange New Worlds, 3 episodes left to go. That is literally the only thing we know about the future of Strange New Worlds, is that there's 3 episodes left in Season 1, and Season 2 will be coming out eventually. So we're going to take this moment to reflect on where we feel Strange New Worlds is in how it fits into our view of Trek, and pros and cons about it in general as a halfway through the first season.
From what we've watched so far.
So as much of a meh as I felt this episode was, there was one continuous theme throughout it that I really liked, and that it reminded me a lot of my other favorite science fiction, Warhammer.
Right.
We had the sort of too good to be true.
Oh, you sort of utopian
Not
society?
the Magellans.
Oh no. I told you I would hit you.
I know. I didn't mean to. Magellans.
From the planet Majalis.
Mm-hmm.
Who are Magellan.
Captain Pike was the only one Magellan on that one. But yeah, their whole utopian society. And then at the end of the episode, you find out that the way they support this utopian society and all of their technology and these amazing castles, cities in the cloud looking thing, is that they hook a small child up to a machine that slowly drains all of his life force out of him to run the rest of their society. And as soon as I saw that, I was like, it's the Golden Throne! It's the Golden Throne! It's the Corpse Emperor!
Yeah.
And then also the episode did have a generally... It wasn't grimdark. It was still very noble dark, because the heroes still think that they can go off and be heroes and save the day.
Yeah.
But it had these really dark undertones to it throughout the episode.
Right.
That I did very much enjoy.
Yes. There were definitely elements of the episode that I appreciated a lot. I love one of the elements that, since it's revealed at the very end of the episode about how this society sustains itself based on the suffering and pain of this small child, the first regent, or maybe I got that wrong, but anyway. And
I don't remember the name of his position.
Me neither. But I feel like the most interesting aspect of that for me was this ancient computer, and they mention the fact that, like, well, why does it have to be this way? And Alora says, we don't know. It's from a time like the technology is sort of beyond us, and we can't figure out why it works this way, why it has to work this way. We've tried to replace it so that we can get along without having to sacrifice a child to this cause.
Another very Warhammer element. Technology that you don't know. Like, you don't understand.
It's just too ancient.
Yeah.
Right? It's too ancient. The ideas and the principles that make it work have been lost.
Yeah.
Right.
And I always love that in sci-fi. The Foundation is my favorite example of it, where you have just this erosion of technology. Because it happens in our own society all the time.
Yeah.
Like, on a daily basis, we might not be super aware of it, but you look at, fall of Rome into the Dark Ages, or post burning of the library at Alexandria. Like, all of this information is just lost, and then you're looking at the roads the Romans built and the aqueducts, and you're like, gee, I don't know, it looks like they used stone, but that's about all I got.
What's that Eddie Izzard line? A bunch of peasants looking at it. It's not a Roman road. Can we eat it?
Yeah.
Oh, classic.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's true. It's just a great sci-fi element, and I love it whenever I find it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I did have some qualms with this episode, particularly with the ending.
Okay.
Well, I had qualms throughout. And I had things that I liked throughout, and we'll get to the things I liked, maybe, if there's time. But one of my big qualms was at the end of this episode, after Pike discovers how this society functions, and that you're going to sacrifice this child, he sort of seems resigned. They just fly off.
It's
like every other Starfleet captain that we've encountered would have ignored the Prime Directive, as Pike has done in multiple episodes, and just figured out a way to save the child, and, consequences be damned, we'll cross that bridge later. Mm-hmm. And he has a golden opportunity because the dad of the child is there, who's been trying to save the child the whole episode in a very underhanded sort of sneaky way.
Yeah.
Like, could Pike not have just walked up to him and like, so you are officially requesting Federation aid in this matter?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the sort of semantics and Federation protocols around that would have had to be bent to the breaking point.
Sure.
But fine, like, Pike's your guy, right? Like you were saying, if anyone's going to do it, it's going to be Pike.
Yeah, I mean, in the first episode, he threatens a race into joining the Federation.
Yeah.
In the second episode, he, I would want to say, desecrates a sacred site, but he very clearly ignores the Shepherds' wish for them to not interfere.
Right.
In the third episode, you find out about the Illyrians. Again, Pike doesn't care.
Yeah, Pike's like, I know I should report the fact that Una is Illyrian, genetically modified, and therefore probably not fit to serve as my XO here on the ship.
Right, I should let Starfleet Command make that decision, but no, he decides to not even...
Yeah, he's like, oh, it'll come out sometime and we'll deal with it then.
Yeah.
So
Starfleet Command loves surprises.
Right, so the fact that Pike opts not to step in here, I'm attributing to the moment that, because he's having this conflict with Alora, right? Mm-hmm. Where he's like, I'm deeply attracted to you.
Yes, the pelvic magnetism between the two of them.
There's some pelvic magnetism at play here, clouding his judgment. So she's trying to convince him at the end of the episode, like, it has to be this way. Can you honestly say there's no child suffering hunger, sickness?
Yeah.
And where you come from, and it's not addressed. And he doesn't come back to say, that is exactly what I'm telling you, right?
Yeah. There's so many examples of this exact same conversation coming up in many different Star Trek iterations, and the rebuttal is always why, yes, at one point in time, humanity on Earth was rampant with child starvation and suffering and yada, yada, yada. The long list of things. But we learned to overcome that. We found a different way of doing things so that we don't have to have people living in suffering.
Right. That's the whole point of the Federation.
Yeah.
Right?
And Pike either is not either Strange New Worlds is trying to say that where the Federation is during Strange New Worlds is not as far along as it is when Kirk is on his 5-year mission.
Okay.
It's definitely not as far along on as you get in Next Generation, but it doesn't even seem to be where Kirk is in terms of plentifulness and the availability of replicators.
Right. Well, but I feel like we've established at least even on Earth, we've established this idea of sort of harmony and plenty as far back as Enterprise. Archer establishes that as sort of the modus operandi of what's going on Earth.
That's very true.
You know,
if it wasn't his girlfriend, I'm sure it actually isn't even his girlfriend, because remember, he's got a girlfriend back on Earth,
right?
Or a wife, or whatever their relationship was.
And he's also, not actually welcome on Majalis, as an outsider. So,
well, she mentioned several times that like he would be the exception because of his heroicness and his striking heroicness.
Really, just the pelvic magnetism. Yeah.
Really, it was, I'm pretty powerful here, and you're my booty call, so...
So, like, we're going to get some looks, but you can stay.
But you'll be okay.
Yeah. The return of Sam Kirk.
Are we calling that a return? Or are we calling that a slap in the face?
I felt slapped in the face.
You felt slapped in the face.
Just because... Ever since the end of episode 1, when you see and they introduce Sam Kirk and they make such a meal out of that.
Yeah.
Right? They make such a meal out of that.
Yes. They tease his name. Then they just go to town on the one scene he's in.
Yeah.
The start of the next episode, he's right in the thick of it.
And then he's dead.
And then he's dead.
And then he resuscitated.
Yeah, and in this episode, he shows up just long enough to mention that he has conflict aversion issues.
Yes. La'an is asking like why he didn't say all of these things to her face when he's talking to Uhura about the security rotations and the training. And he mentions the fact that he's conflict averse.
And then walks off the screen. Never to be seen again.
I hope so at this point. I'm pissed off.
What credentials for a Starfleet lieutenant, though?
Conflict averse?
In his defense. There's conflict averse, and then there's smart enough to know not to pick a fight with La'an.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
fair.
Who on the Enterprise is going to step to that willingly, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would keep my comments to myself too.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I mean, Una probably would.
Yeah, Una's probably about the only one.
Yeah.
At long last, in this episode, tricorders finally make an appearance in Star Trek. What do you know? And it was so funny the way they did it, because it's almost as if somebody got around to rewatching all of the episodes before they wrote this episode.
Yes.
I'm like, you know what? We forgot tricorders.
Let's
mention it as many times as possible.
As pointedly as we can.
There's a scene where Spock's just walking down the hallway of the Enterprise, like, waving a tricorder around. Yeah.
Right. And then La'an, one of her named security, lessons is let the tricorder lead the way.
Yes.
Right?
Which, that must have been one of her lessons after, all of the away missions.
No, yeah, this is something she recently just learned herself.
Yes. She's like, oh, yes, you're right. Tricorders would have made all of our away missions much simpler.
Yeah. Sam wouldn't have died. But we saw Morn in that Lower Decks episode.
We did see Morn in that Lower Decks episode.
He didn't have any lines. How unfortunate.
Yeah, that's so out of character for Morn.
It was the joke. Yeah. It was a nice, very warm, nostalgic backdrop to the episode.
Yeah.
Right? It was nice to hear Quark and Kira with their original voice actors. You're right. It didn't add a whole bunch to what was going forward with the episode, but it was still nice.
I had a moment towards, not the very beginning of that episode, but when you finally, the first time Kira is walking across the bridge and she goes into the captain's office and those doors open, and for a minute,
yes.
I was convinced I was going to see a baseball on a desk and Cisco, and I had to stop for a second to, oh, right.
He's a prophet.
He's a prophet now. Ouch. Feels bad.
I mean, I was too. I was like, as soon as the doors open and she's like going to sit down at the desk, I'm like, what do you, oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh.
Although if any show could have gotten away with having Cisco, it would have been Lower Decks.
Yeah.
Like, he could have just been sitting there and been like, weren't you? And he's like, yeah.
Yeah, I finished.
Yeah.
It took about 3 or 4 days of real time, and then I was done.
Oh man, could you imagine if that was true? And like, after the conversation he has with Jake and Cassidy about how he has to go away, and they're all devastated. He comes back 4 days later. He's like, actually, that was not as long as I thought it was going to be. So we're talking about captains,
right?
Well, that was a less than graceful segue, but
so we're talking about captains. Okay, let's go.
Well, now we're talking about captains.
Yeah, we are now.
All right, so 7 episodes into Strange New Worlds, it's hitting some really high points. It's avoided, in my opinion, the really low points. Like, it hasn't committed any egregious acts.
No,
but for some
committed any egregious acts. What is it? Hasn't given us a Neelix?
You know what? After some of the things I've seen in some other Star Treks, Neelix is no longer an egregious act, okay? Tuvix is an egregious act.
Okay, so yeah, they haven't given us Tuvix.
They haven't given us Tuvix. Right. But the show, for me, hasn't consistently... I started off thinking it was probably going to end up being one of my favorite Star Treks.
Uh-huh. Because the pilot was amazing.
The pilot was fantastic.
Yeah.
But that hasn't materialized for me. Now, there's still 3 episodes left in this season, and it's only season 1.
Right.
So there's a long way to go, and I don't want to, jump to too many conclusions on Strange New Worlds. But there is something missing from this show that really pulls me to it. And I'm starting to think, and I want to know your opinion on this, because I'm starting to think that it's Pike. And that as good of an actor as he is, and as fun as he is to watch on screen, there's something in the way he captains the ship that doesn't feel like it's bringing that crew together and thus pulling the audience into that crew the way that Picard did.
Mm-hmm. And the other great captains.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's valid. I think I'm not necessarily going to know the answer to that. Time kind of, deepens my appreciation of Star Trek. So as time goes by and I do like a rewatch of this, years later, I'm going to feel differently about it. Mm-hmm. Especially as once the series ends and you can look at the whole thing as a whole.
Sure.
It has a big impact.
Yes.
But what I am missing from Pike is I am missing something. And the strange thing is it's something that I think he may have had during his stint commanding Discovery. Because I remember him in that show, I remember being more compelled by Pike. Mm-hmm. He had these really fascinating inputs about sort of the spirituality of space exploration.
Yes.
And what that meant as far as, scientific versus self-discovery. He explored those questions in these like really graceful, like understated ways. Mm-hmm. Really cool vibe.
Yes.
And that's why I was so excited, when I heard that Strange New Worlds was a Pike spinoff. I was like, yes.
I feel like if they had one of those episodes in Strange New Worlds, that might right the ship for me.
Right. Well, that's the thing is 7 episodes in, we haven't had a real... This is kind of Pike's first sort of Pike episode.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And then I just don't
Outside
know,
of the pilot.
Outside of the pilot, but I just don't know that it hit strongly enough.
In every Star Trek, there's lots of scenes where the captain is sitting in their ready room or wherever, and the valued officer counselor, whoever that role is, comes in and they sit and they talk and you get this really deep reflective moment from the captain.
Right.
The only one of those we've had with Pike, I think it's come up a couple of times, but in every one of them he's like, oh yeah, I'm going to die. Oh yeah, I'm going to die. I'm like, okay, but you're not dead yet. So can I get something else to connect me to this character other than charming, handsome, witty, and going to die?
Right. I think that's totally valid. I also feel, just to tag on to that discussion, I think that Una is supposed to be filling that role, right? Where she's supposed to be coming to him and to unpack some of these things.
Yeah, they set it up that way.
Yeah, they have
at first.
They've had like one discussion that I would say fits that bill so far.
Yeah,
and we need more because you're right. That is the forum for the captain to really flesh out, their feelings on any given subject.
Mm-hmm. So Enterprise, through immediately, you are pulled in by Archer and all of his conflicts, and like his internal conflicts, his external conflicts. You empathize with him. You're rooting for him from the very beginning.
It's
in a way that I haven't experienced with other captains.
I haven't experienced with any other casting in Star Trek. Captain Archer was like I think the single greatest casting choice in the entire franchise. I'm sticking with that.
Are you saying all characters or just captains?
No, I'm saying all characters.
Wow.
All characters. I'm sorry.
I respect that.
Yeah.
I respect that. I don't know if I agree with it. I'm going to have to think about that.
You go ahead.
I'll come back to you on that.
No,
I don't know.
You agree with it. I'm reading your mind here. You agree with it. I get that you have
Single
to reach...
greatest casting choice. Mm-hmm. Better than Patrick Stewart.
Mm-hmm. Patrick Stewart is up. I mean, he's up there.
Because Patrick Stewart is definitely the best actor they've ever cast.
Well, there's no denying that. There's no denying that. But to have a captain who draws you in so completely from the first episode, from the first moment, and never
lets you go.
Never lets go.
No. Like, you are in the trenches with Archer. Like, you feel connected to that character.
Yeah. So, and that's, of course, this gets into like these subjective notions of like, who's your favorite captain?
Sure.
Right.
But
that's
as
fine.
we said, like, this is a discussion.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, it's fine. It's hard to use kind of...
subjective is where...
It's where we live.
Yeah. It's where all nerds live.
It's where we live. I'm just... he's my favorite captain. And that being said, in a show like most Star Treks that are so sort of captain driven most of the time, at least from that era back, right?
Yeah.
That also kind of goes to say for me that he's my favorite character in the franchise's history as well.
He's probably my favorite captain too. There's one exception, but I don't think it counts. Lorca.
Oh.
And it's not because I particularly love Lorca as a captain, but that twist,
oh my gosh,
the first time you watch Discovery, and as soon as you know it, and all the little hints they drop throughout that series just click into place.
It's true.
You're like, holy shit. Lorca is an evil genius on a level of evil genius I didn't think Star Trek was capable of developing.
But they did. Yeah, no, that is... So I understand why you can say that maybe it's not fair, but I'm going to go ahead and say that's fair game because it was so masterfully done.
Yeah.
Right?
So that would be the only one I would, flip a coin 50-50 on any given day. It's going to be Lorca or Archer.
Okay.
Is my answer for that. But I want this notion that modern Treks are moving away from a captain-driven story. Do you think that ultimately is the right choice?
Well,
because you've seen more of Discovery than I have.
I have.
You've seen more of Picard than I have.
Yes.
You've also probably seen more of the Lower Decks than I have.
probably. So I don't know that the choice in and of itself can be right or wrong. I just feel like it's the easier formula, right, to have a captain-driven story. It's the easier because now here's the person who sort of by necessity has to at times interact with all of the bridge crew and even, you know, less often like the lower echelons, you know. So it's easier to drive a story from that point.
Yeah.
Right? Because the far-reaching nature of being a captain on your ship.
Yes.
So that makes things easier. But like Discovery taught us, like First Officer really kind of does just as well.
For me, I think I can pretty definitively say it's the wrong choice. Because we talked about this during the episode with the Gorn, that connection between the captain and the ship. For me, Star Trek has never been a show about an individual. It's a show about a ship. And it's exploration. Mm-hmm. And the ship is embodied in the captain. So if you don't really have a strong captain driving your story,
you're going to be missing that element.
The rest of the crew and the rest of the ship just kind of seem to just be there. I would like to see a reoccurring villain that is strong for Strange New Worlds.
I agree.
A la Ducat, the Borg Queen.
Yeah.
Giorgio. Mm-hmm. You know, this character that can continually show up, play off your captain to help build your captain stronger, and also drive some story. And I don't know why Strange New World. I don't know why any of these modern Star Treks aren't leaning into Cardassians.
That's on both our wish lists, as we've discussed off camera. We want that villain to be taken. We want that spot taken by the Cardassians and maybe the last episode or two of this season. That's on our wish list.
Yes.
Right? Because the way the Cardassians and the conflict with the Federation are introduced to us in both Next Generation and at the beginning of Deep Space Nine.
The cod is.
Are that, you know, there's been this sort of ongoing tension,
mm-hmm.
but there's been, you know, sort of an out-and-out conflict that has happened in the past, you know, off screen.
Mm-hmm.
And so it seems like just sort of in the timeline of Star Trek, this season or next season of Strange New Worlds would be a great time to start deciding what that looked like. So I would be really interested to see the sort of initial relationship that turns into conflict between the Federation and the Cardassian Empire, you know, and these sort of events and the tone of things that leaves people like Miles O'Brien so traumatized when the Cardassians show up and come to visit the Enterprise and TNG.
Yeah, because they tease it in TNG. Well, they don't tease it in TNG, but you see a lot. There's that episode where Picard gets abducted by the Cardassians.
Yeah.
There are 4 lights.
Great episode.
That's a phenomenal episode. And the Cardassians are they do a great job in that episode of demonstrating just the brutality of the Cardassian Empire.
Yeah, or at least the upper echelons.
Yeah. And in DS9, in flashbacks, you see glimpses of like how they treated the Bajorians, and they're, again, very dark. But for most of DS9, the Cardassians are sort of past it. Like, they're kind of comical in how not threatening they are.
Yeah, I mean, because they just lost Bajor, you know.
A humiliating defeat.
Yeah, like, they just lost to a bunch of guerrilla tactics, basically.
Yeah.
This enormous, they're system-spanning galactic empire.
Yeah.
That
and they
can't hold on to a single planet.
Their technology seems to have eroded.
Yeah,
because their ships are not... They're not that powerful. You know.
Yeah, well, I feel like they I don't know that they've eroded much. I feel like they still kind of hold their own against the other sort of Alpha Quadrant powers at that point.
Okay, because like I look at a Cardassian cruiser and I look at like a Romulan warbird.
Yeah.
And the warbird seems way more powerful.
It does a little bit.
Same with like the Klingon battle. Not the birds of prey, because those are much smaller than
but like the Chitang or something.
Yeah, like they just seem
Yeah.
Like they seem kind of...
They do a little.
They seem kind of like, yeah, you know, okay. Well, because the Klingons show up and just kick the shit out of Cardassia.
They do that, yes.
So...
But there was something, and I'm maybe just not remembering my DS9 very well here, but I feel like there was something... They were weak at that point when Gowron decided, no, let's attack.
Yeah, like their whole government's in turmoil.
Yeah.
Like their government's been overthrown.
Right,
And they think it's the Dominion.
That's right.
And that's why Gowron
So it wasn't necessarily
invades.
it wasn't necessarily like a military.
It wasn't the most organized defense.
Right.
Yeah.
So it was just like the element of surprise and chaos.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
But that does lead Ducat to be, you know, privateering on his stolen bird of prey.
Those are some great episodes.
Like that's the level that Cardassia is reduced to. Gul Dukat is their best hope, and his only ship is a stolen bird of prey. I would like to know what Alpha or Beta Quadrant alien you would like to see explored more. We wanted Cardassians. You probably have a different idea. Love to hear about that. If you also want to chime in on the conversation of favorite captains and let us know why Lorca and Archer are not the correct choices, I would love to have that discussion with you as well. So leave it in the comments. Hit us up on Facebook. But I've been Max.
And we will.
And we will trek you next week.